looking at powers of sums, and then we're going to look at solving by factoring. How are we going to do x plus 3 cubed? What are you going to do? Those are not the same thing. Does not equal. Why are they not equal? You can't just square each of your terms. That's not what that's saying. Does that make sense? So you have to do x plus 3 times x plus 3 times x plus 3. It will not be x cubed plus 27. Does that make sense? Why you have to do it 3 times? Okay. Do you normally distribute like 3 sets of parentheses at the same time? So we're going to do 2 of them. That is what you get when you say x plus 3 times x plus 3. But we have another x plus 3. Does that make sense? Now what do we have? Yep, x times x squared is x squared times 6x times x, 6x times 3, 9 times x. I don't know if you're writing it down, it probably makes more sense. 9 times 3 is 7. You have a 3 term by a 2 term. What's 3 times 2? Do we have 6 terms? So we probably didn't leave one out. Does that make sense? Do any of them combine? That's how it or expands. Does that make sense? Why you can't just do x cubed plus 27? You actually have to distribute it. Okay? They might do a 4th power. They're not going to do 1/4. We will learn in pre-calculus how to deal with ones that are like to the 15th. You don't actually expand it. Any questions on this? All right. How would you actually solve that equation for x? Nope. Nope. That's what she is. Nope. 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 What? Any ideas? No, it doesn't tell us x equals 0. Nope. No, you don't want to. You don't want to expand it. No, you don't move anything. Nobody remembers? No. If x plus 2 equals 0, 0 times x minus 5 would still be 0, right? How could x plus 2 equal 0? Subtract 2. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0, right? 0 times negative 7, is that 0? But is there another possible answer that would make the equation equal 0? Because x minus 5 could equal 0. Does that make sense? So x equals, they wouldn't put tilde. And then, yeah, 7 times 0 is still 0. As long as one of them equals 0, the equation equals 0. Yeah, both of these would be in your answer. Does that make sense? Do y'all remember doing these? No? Okay. Usually they're going to be like this. What is different about this one from the last one? Okay, so before we can actually solve it, what are we going to have to do? Okay. Plus x equals 0. Now what do we have to do? No, factor. How will it factor? Do you agree? So each of the factors equals 0. Does that make sense? So x equals 3, 4, negative 2. Does that make sense? They could be bigger numbers, but if they're to the third, you'll be able to plot an x. Oh, no, there won't be more than 3 because y'all don't know how to factor more than 3. We've got an equation on this one. You know, on those ones that y'all had on your test, they've just been expressions, and you've had to factor out a negative. We could write it so that the x cubed is positive, right? And then we won't have to factor out that negative. Would I want to leave my x cubed over here, or would I want to move them over here? I'd want to move them to the left, because then it'll be a positive x cubed. Does that make sense? And then we don't have to worry about factoring out that negative. You can't do that on an expression. Why not? Equals, it would equal 0. Didn't know what? So there's nothing over there, but it's still an equation. But the ones that y'all had on your last test and the test before that, those were expressions where you had to factor out the negative. But on these, I mean, you can still do it where you factor out a negative, but you can make it such that you don't have that negative. Does that make sense? What would you factor out? Okay. This one is a little bit different. Where does the third one come from? This is a factor. Because if it's 0, 0 times whatever that is times whatever that is equals 0. Does that make sense? X equals negative 7 and x equals 5. Those are your 3 answers. Usually, like, although those end up with the same thing, so there's only one. But usually, if you have like x squared, you're gonna have 2 answers. But on that one, they just happen to be 2. No, you do not. You would just put x equals 3, just one of them. Does that make sense? So usually, if it's x to the 4th, you would have 4 answers. 0, comma, this, comma, that. That'd be fine. Any other questions on these? Okay. they're in this form, are they easier? Mm-hmm. 1 on a 0 on this one on the right. What is out here? Is there any way for that 2 to make the equation a 0? There's not a variable there. Does that make sense? So you can't say x equals 2 is a solution. Does that make sense? Like there's no way for that 2, that part of it, to make the equation equal 0. Only 5 and negative 7 will make the equation 0. Say that again. One of these will be 0, so 0 times 2 is still 0. But there's no way, if you plug in like a 2, this equation will equal a number. You don't do anything. You just ignore it. Just 5 and negative 7. No, it wouldn't do that. But if it was like this, keep saying do it like that. But no, they won't do that. Looking at this one, what would be your x value? Why is there a 0 on this one? 2 times x equals 0. So what does x have to equal? Yeah, what Molly just said. What? You'll have a solution, like a solution. Yeah. Yeah. Unless they're duplicated. Like on this last example, there were 2, but they were the same thing. Does that make sense? Any questions on these? Usually the ones that they're going to give you are going to look like this, where you have to factor them yourself. Hence the reason we've been working on factoring all year. Factoring is used a lot. Okay? Any questions on these? Okay.